This is my CBT presentation. CBT is widely considered the gold standard for treating depression, anxiety, and many other psychological challenges. By the end of this presentation, I hope that you will understand the principles of it, the techniques, and underlying theories. The primary creator of CBT was Dr. Aaron T. Beck in the 1960s. He was a psychiatrist studying depression when he noticed his patients often had automatic negative thoughts that influenced their emotions. These automatic negative thoughts will be addressed later. It's quite occurrent in this. Around the same time, Albert Ellis developed rational emotive behavior therapy, or REBT, which also influenced on changing irrational beliefs. Ellis's work influenced CBT, but Beck is credited with creating the structured framework we now call CBT. So CBT grew out of the combination of cognitive approaches from Beck and Ellis, and also the behavioral principles from earlier psychology. So, when did CBT come about? CBT developed in the 1960s and 70s. Its roots go back even further to behaviorism in the early 20th century, which focused on observable behavior and learning principles. The cognitive revolution in the 1950s and 60s emphasized the importance of eternal thought processes, which behaviorism largely ignored. The shift opened the door for therapies that focus on how our thoughts influence our emotions and actions. By the 1970s, Beck's cognitive therapy combined with behavioral techniques to form now what we call cognitive behavioral therapy. So, what was going on in the world? Before CBT, psychoanalysis dominated therapy. It was long term, insight focused, and difficult to measure scientifically. Behaviorism offered practical, measurable approaches but didn't address the eternal thoughts or emotions. The cognitive revolution, influenced by research in computer science and information theory, changed psychology's focus to include how people think, process information, or interpret experiences. Post World War II, there was a growing demand for short term, structured, and empirically validated therapies that could be applied in clinics, hospitals, and schools. CBT addressed these needs and fit the emerging evidence based trend in psychology. What need did CBT fill? CBT filled several important gaps in psychology. It provided a structured, evidence based approach. It taught clients practical skills to cope with distressing thoughts and behaviors. It addressed internal cognition, not just observable behavior. And then, unlike previous therapies, CBT gives clients tools that they can practice in daily life and promote lasting change. How CBT differed from our earlier theories. CBT differs from psychoanalysis because it focused on the current thoughts and behavior rather than unconscious conflicts and early childhood experiences. It differs from behaviorism because it considers internal cognition as a key driver of emotions and behaviors. CBT is structured, goal oriented, and short term, making it more measurable and practical than earlier therapies. How CBT expanded on other theories. So, CBT combined cognitive and behavioral approaches into comprehensive framework. These thoughts, feelings, and behaviors essentially are all interconnected. They're all go off of each other. It emphasizes collaboration between the therapist and the client, known as collaborative empirism. This is essentially testing the thoughts against evidence rather than simply just instructing the client. CBT's flexibility allowed for the development of specialized therapies such as DBT, which is now widely used. It's also used at the facility I currently work at, which has proven very effective for many of my clients. It also has promoted a scientific, evidence based approach to therapy, paving the way for research driven mental health interventions. Some key words for CBT: automatic thoughts, quick involuntary thoughts that pop into the mind in response to a situation, often negative, influencing emotions and behaviors. An example of this would be like seeing someone saying hi to them and they just walk right by you. You would immediately assume that in a negative mindset, be like, oh, they don't like me. However, in all reality, it's just they didn't hear you, or and something like that. Cognitive distortions, systematic errors, or biased ways of thinking that can lead to negative emotions, such as all or nothing thinking. Core beliefs, deeply held fundamental beliefs about oneself, others, and the world that shape perception, thought patterns, and behavior. Cognitive restructuring. Cognitive restructuring is the process of identifying, challenging, and modifying unhelpful or distorted thoughts to develop more balanced adaptive thinking. This is the cognitive model. The cognitive model is the foundation of CBT. It shows how thoughts, feelings, and behaviors are interconnected. Our emotional reactions are largely determined by how we interpret events, not the events themselves. By identifying and changing these distorted thoughts, we can influence emotions and behaviors in a more positive way and get out of the circle of having negative thinking when approaching situations based on past experiences. What causes hurt and suffering? Negative automatic thoughts, which are spontaneous, often distorted thoughts about oneself, others, or situations, such as I always fail, and these trigger emotional pain. It's essentially what I mentioned earlier about having someone saying hi to someone and them not responding back to you, and you immediately assuming that they don't like you. That's what this is. Cognitive distortions, bias or irrational thinking patterns, such as overgeneralizing, looking at something way different than what the actual situation is and assuming the worst. Maladaptive core beliefs, these are deep-seated negative beliefs such as I am unlovable that predispose individuals to distress. Simply, just the mindset and the way of thinking is playing a large role in how they interact with others and how they continue to live life. Mismatch between perception and reality. Suffering arises when thoughts interpret events in ways that are inaccurate, exaggerated, or unhelpful, not from these events themselves. Behavioral consequences. Avoidance, withdrawal, or other unhelpful behaviors reinforced by negative thoughts that can maintain or worsen emotional pain. Uh, Simply, there's a lot of clients that I have that tend to like gravitate to seclusion and just being away from other people, isolating, and teaching them that isolating isn't always the answer, and that it just kind of puts them in a hole where they all they think about is the negative rather than approaching the problem or whatever it is and getting their mind off of it or doing something fun, essentially. And it stops those thoughts from affecting your daily life. So, what promotes change? The identifying these negative or distorted thoughts, becoming aware of automatic thoughts and cognitive distortions that cause the distress. Essentially, just realizing what how you're viewing a situation. Cognitive restructuring, challenging and replacing unhelpful thoughts with more balanced, realistic ones. um, Behavioral interventions, engaging in positive adaptive behaviors, behavioral activation, exposure to feared situations to reinforce new patterns, such as exposure therapy, and being able to put yourself in situations where you can grow and be challenged more rather than just sitting in what's comfortable, which is often isolation. Developing awareness slash core beliefs, examining and modifying deep-seated beliefs about oneself, others, and the world that maintain emotional problems. Recently, we have a client that we just got that she genuinely believes that she's crazy and that she's unlovable and nothing can fix her, uh, but is showing a need to be able to change that thinking at least. So what we're doing is working with her and developing a foundation where she believes more in herself by having her complete activities and praising her for it rather than what she's used to and being constantly critiqued and bothered when completing things. Skill building and practice, learning coping strategies, problem solving, stress management skills that generalize daily life. Um, a lot of kids also struggle with self harm that I deal with, and being able to give them healthy coping strategies. It really depends on the kid, but a lot of an example would be like we give them chewing on ice or holding ice, and it helps them regulate. It's using a self-soothe skill, essentially, that's developed by DBT, and that is able to help them regulate and be able to do something more positive rather than negative. Collaborative empirism, therapist and client work together to test thoughts against reality and gather evidence for healthier thinking. And then homework and real world application, practicing skills outside therapy sessions to reinforce learning and promote lasting change. In my facility, it's a residential. We often allow them to get passes when they have shown safe behavior and have earned a stage 2, which is just essentially labeling that they've had safe behavior for a long period. And through that, we're able to tell how well they can function at home compared to what they did in the past. And usually it is improvement, and their guardians also agree with that. And it also gives us time to see what they still need to work on when it comes to communicating and living at home again. So this is the quiz I created, and it's just 3 questions. But who is considered the primary creator of CBT? John B. Watson, Aaron T. Beck, Joseph Wolpe, or Sigmund Freud? And the second question is, in CBT, it is not the situation itself that causes emotional distress, but rather the way a person thinks about the situation. True or false? And then, which of the following is a key concept in CBT? Automatic thoughts, ID, ego, and superego, free association, or classical conditioning only? So the main points of CBT is that CBT bridges the thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. It was developed by Beck, which with influences from Ellis, and it has an evidence-based, structured, and practical approach. Addresses both surface and deeper beliefs. Personally, I really enjoy this theory as I have been using it for the past year at my facility that I work at. I feel like it sits really well with the kids, and it gives them a good way of adjusting and analyzing their own growth, and it gives them ways to rationalize and think more than just jumping to conclusions like they seem to do before they first got here. So the answer key for the quiz is question 1B, Aaron T. Beck. He developed cognitive therapy in the 1960s, which evolved into CBT. Uh, Question 2 is true. Emotional distress in CBT is primarily caused by thoughts and beliefs about events, not the events themselves. Question 3 is A, automatic thoughts. Automatic thoughts are a central concept in CBT. The other options are from psychoanalysis and behaviorism. These are my sources. I really hope you guys enjoyed. I know I really, really do enjoy this theory, and I hope you guys learned a good bit at least. And thank you for listening.